In desperation, the old man holds a man with a gun out of control, while shouting for his friend to flee immediately. Without thinking twice, the young man starts to run away, while apologizing for leaving the old man behind. Even knowing about his certain death, the old man continues holding the man with the gun, who, seeing that the old man wouldn't let go, shoots him, taking his life. The old man, in his last bloody words, mentions a chip, but shortly after, he dies. Kim Jun runs in desperation while also crying for his friend's death. In the same place, a confrontation begins between the SWAT and some terrorists. Soon, the large confrontation is even reported on the news, which mentions heavily armed terrorists invading the Defense Development Center. The report brings the news that, fortunately, there are accounts that most of the terrorists have been contained so far. The terrorists' targets were weapons such as ballistic missiles, ASA radar, and fighter jets. These are weapons with the most advanced technology and materials in Korea. It was also revealed that they tried to steal the data chip from ADD, the chip that the old man and Kim are giving their lives to protect. Kim Jun, who ran to a room to hide from his friend's killer, enters the room where he suspects the man might be. At the door, the man calls Kim Director and says he knows he is there. He urges him to hurry up and hand over the chip. Furious and with his gun, the figure insinuates that it's their fault he can no longer escape easily. However, he tells him not to be afraid, that if he hands over the chip, he won't kill him, and if he keeps his mouth shut, he could offer him a reward. Kim Jun, still desperate with the chip, thinks he's lying. The value of this chip is unprecedented, but seeing that the situation won't unfold the way he wanted, Kim Jun decides to swallow the chip as a desperate measure. The figure is indignant after seeing him swallow the chip and, furious, starts shooting at Kim Jun repeatedly while cursing him. After shooting Kim several times, the figure stops, grabs him by the collar, and asks if that chip was really worth sacrificing his life for. Kim Jun, with pride still in his last breath, gives the middle finger to the figure named Lee Ho-jung, his former teammate who betrayed him, and calls him a bastard, leaving him furious. However, before he could do anything, the SWAT intercepts the door of the place where they were and orders him to stop immediately or they will open fire. But Lee, in a desperate move, turns against the police, who open fire on him, also riddling him with bullets. Kim Jun, spitting blood, feels happy to have managed to protect the chip and feels ready to depart. The chip he fought so hard to protect was called the data chip. In 2024, South Korea's defense industry achieved remarkable growth, including the development of 4th and 5th generation fighters, strategic ballistic missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles, and the domestic production of ASA radar. In response, the government consolidated critical military technologies from various companies into a single data chip for management. This effort to protect national secrets ended up attracting terrorists who targeted the chip, resulting in the tragic death of Director Kim Jun of the Defense Development Agency during the confrontation. During the autopsy of Director Kim Jun, who was killed in the terrorist attack, the ADD data chip was found in his stomach. The government decided to award Director Kim the Order of National Security Merit Unification Medal for sacrificing his life to protect the chip. The news report concludes, Kim Jun, who died, wonders if he is dead. However, he finds it strange because if he were dead, he would have the ability to think, so he opens his eyes. Then he notices he can see something. In front of him, a woman with tearful eyes. Kim wonders who she is, then moves his clumsy hand. The girl immediately slaps his face, hard enough to wake even a corpse. Kim Jun quickly gets up in desperation, shouting that her slap hurt. The girl asks if he is okay now. Kim Jun says he doesn't remember anything. The woman, with her hand on her mouth, says he must have hit his head and that's probably why. Kim thinks this place seems like a bar, but he doesn't recognize it. He starts to think that maybe his past is flashing before his eyes, as if they were his last memories. The woman starts shaking him to see if he reacts. Some other injured people arrive, commenting that he started the fight. The woman approaches them, saying it would be better to end the fight right there and offers them money to stop. They accept the money, thank her, and leave. The woman holds Mr. Kim and says she will take him to the hospital and check his head injury. Kim asks for permission and questions who she is. She is shocked by his expression as if he were dying and feels guilty. She picks up the phone and calls someone. Soon, a giant man appears, picks Kim up, and carries him to a car to take him to the general hospital. Kim still thinks his life is flashing before his eyes. He is surprised as the car is about to take him to the hospital. Standing in front of the car, he realizes that he once dreamed of owning a car like this, but with his job, he could never afford it. Looking at it, he affirms to her that the car is not his. However, when he sees his reflection in the car window, he is shocked by his face. He becomes increasingly panicked as his face and body are not his own, but belong to Jin Hyun-sung. Back when Mr. Kim Jun was studying in the US, he couldn't attend Jin's funeral due to visa issues. Later, he heard that Jin got involved in a bar fight and died. Already inside the car and still unable to believe the situation, he asks the young lady if today is January 5th. January 5th is the date when Hyun-sung passed away, an unforgettable date. The young lady confirms it is January 5th and asks if he is regaining consciousness. While looking out the window, he begins to realize that he has ended up in the body of his young friend who had died. Chapter 2. After arriving at the hospital and undergoing tests, even an MRI didn't show any damage requiring serious concern. Still, it would be better for him to remain hospitalized for a few more days and stay under observation. However, stubborn as he is, he insisted to the young lady that he wanted to go home. In his thoughts, he believes it's better to have a place to think and organize himself calmly. Soon, Hyun-sung's father walks in through the door, asking what is going on and insinuating that he caused trouble. He immediately asks the young lady what happened. Bowing, she says that fortunately there was no severe brain injury. Furious, he, calling her a secretary, asks again what he said had happened. Bowing once more and slightly anxious, she explains to her president that the other party was appeased, so there shouldn't be any problems. The director turns and says that this situation cannot reach the media, and if rumors spread, they will face consequences. He leaves, slamming the door forcefully. The secretary, turning to him and calling him assistant director, asks him not to take it seriously. However, she is surprised that he doesn't show any dissatisfaction. He sighs and thinks that this was why Hyun-sung was so rebellious, and also why he hated talking about family. He gets up, puts on his clothes, and says to her that wants to leave. She agrees, and they leave. At his house, he is taking off his clothes to rest while having a calmer place to reorganize his thoughts. He is still perplexed, as he is in the body of his friend who died in 1998. Soon, he removes his watch from his wrist, and something strange, resembling a tattoo, catches his attention. Looking closer, he realizes it is a chip. Suddenly, in front of him, a window appears, startling him. Upon examining it, the window shows a login screen. He quickly finds the window interface outdated. Looking at the login name, he says to the interface, "Authority holder, research director of ADD Kim Jun." Then he enters the username and password. Surprisingly, a tab with hundreds of files appears. Astonished, he comments that these are files of advanced weapons blueprints developed by ADD up to 2024. They were stored in the chip, containing all the manufacturing processes of essential materials. He thinks this is better than winning the lottery. In his previous life, Japan held patents on most of the materials, making development impossible. But now, being in 1998, many of the materials have not yet been patented. Excited, he affirms that he will develop the first weapon and create a patent minefield. Screaming with excitement, he plans to use cutting-edge weapon technology from this era. Now that he is the son of a magnate in the defense industry, it is possible. His excitement is so great that he feels strong headaches, making him kneel on the floor in pain. He wonders if this pain is divine punishment, saving him only to punish him for being greedy. While still writhing in pain, he begins to have flashes of Hyun-sung's memories. He has strong memories of his secretary and soon passes out. After some time, he wakes up, wondering what that was. It was as if his memories were forcibly implanted. He sighs and says that Hyun-sung was an illegitimate son, another reason for his rebellion. However, He also caused too many problems, leading to his loss of prestige and demotion to a minor affiliation. Now, he is an assistant manager at a Jaewoo Group subsidiary that only manufactures CCTV equipment. After having these memories, he feels his hopes have been shattered. He is almost on the verge of being kicked out. He picks up the phone and says he will solve the problem from the previous day first. Now that he is more lucid, he remembers the secretary and notes how worried she appeared and how incredibly beautiful she is. Soon the protagonist goes to his father's company to have a meeting with him. The secretaries try to stop him, saying that his father has a full schedule today. Another one judges him, thinking he came there to cause trouble. The protagonist tells them he understands. However, in his thoughts, he knows they are making excuses to keep him from seeing him. The secretary says he hasn't arrived yet. The protagonist, with a smile, tells them he will wait for him then and that he will wait quietly in his office without bothering anyone. They are enchanted by his smile, losing their composure. The protagonist soon goes to his father's office while repulsed by their attitude, changing the way they treated him after he was friendlier. As he walks, he thinks about how he will resolve this situation with Hyun Sung's father. He considers kneeling. He remembers the harsh words he said to him at the hospital, a severe man who wouldn't care if his son's head was split open, as long as the media didn't find out. On his father's desk, there is a report on firepower testing. The protagonist picks it up and starts reading. He says these tests are underway to improve the performance of 120mm APFSDS projectiles for the K1A1 tank. He recalls that during this period, new Sabot projectiles were being developed. They are trying to surpass American depleted uranium projectiles with tungsten ones. He finds it interesting, but they are wasting time. Korea only managed to develop projectiles of this caliber in 2024. Developing penetrating materials resistant to extreme pressures took more than 30 years. While looking at the report, he realizes he has everything he needs in the data chip. Seeing this as an opportunity, he sits at the computer before the president arrives. Soon, he unpacks all the technology, materials, and methods of how everything is done in the smallest details. He writes and prints everything. The secretary takes the pages and hands them to him, now with a completely friendly posture, apologizing for earlier. The protagonist accepts the apology and tells her to speak in the manner. As they talked, the director opened the door to his office, then walked to his seat. The protagonist stated that he was waiting for him. His father called him an idiot and told him to act normal, ignoring him. He shouted for someone to come in, and soon a person entered. The president told him to get straight to the point. The protagonist observed him sitting and thought that he didn't even make eye contact with him. He appeared exhausted from dealing with his problematic son. No excuse would mean anything to him anymore. His hopes for his son were already exhausted. That was the look Hyun Sung had always received from his father. It even made him feel bad to see it. He then bowed and apologized for causing concern yesterday. Surprised, the old man asked if he even knew what he did yesterday. The protagonist said he did. Furious, the old man asked why he was acting like that, knowing he was wrong, especially at a time when the country was chaotic with the IMF crisis. Getting involved in fights at clubs with women, how much more did he want to stain his father's name for his own satisfaction? He stated that he didn't need his apologies and affirmed that he had wasted his last chance. He said his company would be removed from the group's affiliation, and he would no longer use the surname Jaewoo. He told him to handle everything on his own. The protagonist was surprised by the harsh decision. Being removed from the affiliation would mean cutting all ties. He told the president that he would accept all his decisions, but asked him to reconsider that. Soon, he handed over the documents. The old man started reviewing them, noticing it was a Sabot project for stronger penetrance. The old man said he had already read the reports, and that additional improvements were impossible. But between the parentheses, he read that it increased penetrative power by up to 20%, leaving him shocked and thinking it was incredible. He then asked if it was true. The protagonist, seizing the opportunity, told the old man that if he gave him this chance, he would have it within 3 months. Chapter 3. The old man became calmer and more serious, putting out his cigarette in the ashtray. He said, "A tungsten penetrant with more than 20% penetrative power than depleted uranium. Do you understand what that means?" The protagonist immediately said he did. It would turn all existing tanks into puree, and not only that, but also drastically reduce production costs. The old man asked if he was saying that he had developed this extraordinary material. The protagonist, as an excuse, reminded him that he had a doctorate in metallurgical engineering from KAIST. The old man asked if he thought he was an idiot. Only Germany had this cutting-edge technology, and he had been traveling abroad under the pretext of business trips. He soon assumed he had done something wrong. The protagonist countered, asking if he thought he had stolen from Germany to impress him. Still unsatisfied, the old man asked why he still couldn't deny it clearly. The protagonist asked if he thought he had the capability to acquire national-level technology. The old man remained skeptical of him. The protagonist said that if he still had doubts, he should have it verified at the Miletus Research Institute. Their senior researchers could easily determine if it was German technology. The old man liked the idea and used the phone to contact the secretary. He told her to retrieve the document and fax it to the Miletus Research Institute, instructing her to tell Director Myung to verify it personally and report back immediately. The protagonist was surprised to hear the name Myung-sung and asked his father if he was at Miletus. The old man asked if he was crazy, reminding him that he had taken him there 3 years ago. He asked why he was bothered by his professor checking on him. In his thoughts, the protagonist recalled that Professor Myung-sung had been his professor and his previous life's self. He had dedicated his life to university research until the day he passed away. However, in this life of the protagonist, he was the director of the Miletus Research Institute. He realized this was no longer the future he knew. Memories began to flood his mind again, making him remember that it was Hyun-sung who had recruited Professor Myung to build his base at Miletus. But the story had changed. Soon, the phone rang. The old man answered it and listened attentively. He was soon in awe of what the director had said. He said he had never seen anything like it. A completely different approach. He told her to ask who had designed it, but quickly gave up on the question and hung up the phone. With a different posture and a bit uneasy, he asked what he wanted. The protagonist asked what he meant. The old man said he wouldn't have gambled so high without wanting something in return, and asked if his goal was to return to Miletus. With eyes shining for being far better than he had thought, he said yes. Adjusting his tie, the old man said he would be a purchasing team leader. Nothing higher than that. Considering his history, this was already too generous. However, the protagonist immediately stated that he wanted the position of development team leader. Surprised, the old man asked if he understood the importance of that position and why he wanted to be the development team leader. From his perspective, the purchasing team would be better. He would have a good chance of gaining something. However, the protagonist, with a hungry expression, stated that if it were about money, he would have sold it elsewhere, where they would have paid better. The old man was surprised by his words. They stared at each other, and the old man wondered what had happened to make him change so much. He softened, saying for him to return soon, as he would discuss the matter with the executives. The protagonist agrees to notify him, while thinking that he might have been too greedy. Soon he says goodbye, but someone comments that they have arrived and calls him father. He says he heard from outside that Hyun-sung is returning to Miletus. The protagonist, sweating nervously, remarks that it has been a long time since he last saw his brother and the executive director Jin Hyun-chol of Miletus. They are brothers from different mothers. He doesn't like Hyun-sung much, who gives the protagonist a strong pat on the back and sarcastically asks if he is struggling to find rare talents for the company. The protagonist feels uncomfortable with the pat, but quickly bows to his father and says he will leave. His father thanks him for his work. As he leaves, they exchange glances, and the protagonist thinks things are becoming more interesting. We have the Jae-woo group structure composed of various smaller groups forming the larger Jae-woo group. The protagonist's secretary hands him some position report forms and mentions that she checked the corporate rankings and Jae-woo rose to 27th place. The protagonist states that this is not due to Jae-woo's growth, but because an unprecedented economic crisis forced other companies to downsize. He then tells the secretary she can leave for the day. These reports are for him to understand Miletos's business landscape, but it is impossible for him to review everything at once. Looking to the side, he notices that his secretary has not left yet and asks why she is still there. Smiling, she says she couldn't leave while he is still working and offers her help if he just gives the word. He then asks if she could focus on summarizing the defense affiliates for him and set aside anything like Jaewoo construction or distribution. She hands him the first one. Jaewon Daeon, one of Jaewoo Group's 3 main defense affiliates, specializes in the development of armored vehicles such as tanks and self-propelled artillery. President Jin Hyun-pil acts as its true control tower. Originally established for aircraft maintenance, this company has accumulated sufficient technical capacity to license the production of aircraft engines in this era. A future key partner in developing South Korea's 4th-generation fighter jets, even thinking about the Nuriho space program makes my heart race. Now, what he wanted, Jaewoo Miletos, the company he intends to control at all costs. Conquering Miletos means Cosmos Aero and Daeon will naturally fall into his hands. To the general public, Miletos is just an unknown defense contractor that manufactures projectiles, but in reality, Miletos is the core and controlling company of the Jaewoo Group. Its chemical materials production line, munitions, and unparalleled growth engine for armaments make it a fundamental industry and the axis of weapon production, encompassing Cosmos Aero and Daeon. The secretary hands over Miletos's revenue, saying it is much higher than the others. The protagonist states that this is natural. Without materials, weapon production is impossible. Furthermore, once developed, materials for armaments have astronomical added value. The secretary asks, "So that's why you insisted on Miletos?" "I thought it was just because it's a lesser-known company, which makes it easier to place parachute executives." The protagonist says that last comment was unnecessary. He finds the R&D budget strange. The secretary excuses herself to answer the phone. She hangs up, super excited and happy, and announces that starting tomorrow, he must report directly to Miletos's development team as team leader. The protagonist, with irony, says he should be laughing and forces a laugh, but he thinks things are going to get even more interesting from now on. The beginning of a legend is about to unfold.